In the wide, unmerciful stretch of the Wyoming plains, where the wind spoke louder than most men dared to, lived a rancher named Elias Crow, a man carved from solitude. His ranch sat miles from town, a lonely cabin surrounded by dry grass, broken fences and memories that refused to fade. Elias was known in the nearest settlement as a hard-working man, honest to the bone but cursed with a quiet that unsettled people. His wife had died years earlier during childbirth and the child with her. Since then, Elias spoke only when necessary, and even then, his voice sounded like it had been dragged up from somewhere deep and buried. Loneliness is a dangerous thing on the frontier. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly, into empty chairs, cold nights, and meals eaten in silence. Elias tried hiring help, tried church, tried whiskey. Nothing filled the space left behind. The ranch demanded more than one pair of hands, and life demanded more than one beating heart. That was when the idea reached him, spoken half in, yes, by a trader passing through town. Plenty of women out east, the man said. Widows, immigrants, girls with nothing to lose. Some men pay to bring them west. Marriage of convenience. The words lingered like smoke. Weeks later, Elias stood in the dusty office of a marriage broker, his hat clutched in his hands, his eyes fixed on the floor. He wasn't buying love. He knew that. He was buying survival, his ranches, and maybe his own. That's how Clara Whitmore arrived on a rattling stagecoach one blazing afternoon. She wasn't what Elias expected. She stood tall, eyes sharp and unafraid, her dress simple but clean, her posture unbroken by the long journey west. She looked at the land the way a soldier looks at a battlefield, measuring, calculating, refusing to be intimidated. They barely spoke at first, two strangers bound by desperation. That night, inside the dim, lantern-lit cabin, Clara finally spoke. "I will be your wife," she said calmly. "I will cook, tend the house, and stand beside you in public. But there is one condition." Elias lifted his eyes. "I am not property," she continued. "I will have a room of my own. I will choose when and if I share your bed. And one day when I ask, you will help me find the truth about what happened to my brother." The wind rattled the windows. Elias could have refused. Many men would have. Instead, after a long silence, he nodded. Deal. Neither of them knew that in agreeing to her condition, Elias had just stepped onto a path that would tear open old wounds, challenge everything he believed about strength, and redefine what it truly meant to love. And somewhere deep inside that empty ranch house, something long dead began to stir. Marriage did not soften Elias overnight. He remained a man of few words, rising before dawn, returning after dark. But Clara noticed things others wouldn't. The way he left food for stray dogs. The careful way he repaired broken tools instead of replacing them. The grief that haunted his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Clara, in turn, was not the fragile bride the town expected. She worked the land, learned the cattle routes, faced down men who mistook her silence for weakness, and slowly she earned something far rarer than respect: trust. Weeks turned into months. One cold evening, Clara finally spoke of her brother. "He came west looking for land," she said. Then the letter stopped. The last one mentioned a ranch near the Black Ridge. Elias stiffened. Black Ridge was outlaw territory. Men disappeared there. Graves were unmarked. Without hesitation, Elias saddled his horse. They rode together into danger, not as husband and wife, but as allies bound by honor. What they found shattered them both. The ranch at Black Ridge was abandoned, burned to the ground. Beneath the ashes lay the truth. Clara's brother had uncovered a land theft scheme run by powerful men. He was silenced for it. Grief broke Clara in a way Elias recognized too well. That night, under a sky crowded with stars, she wept openly for the first time. Elias did not speak. He simply stayed. Days later, when they returned home, something had changed. The silence between them no longer felt empty, it felt shared. On the first night Clara came to his room, she did not come as part of a deal. She came by choice. And Elias understood then. The condition hadn't been a demand. It had been a test. Not of obedience, but of character. Years later, the Crow Ranch became known not for its size or wealth, but for its warmth, for the woman who stood equal beside her husband, for the man who learned that strength was not domination, but patience, humility, and the courage to change. And whenever the wind crossed the plains, it carried a quiet truth. The loneliest man in the West didn't buy a wife. He earned a partner. The land remembers everything. That was something Elias Crow came to understand as the years passed. The soil beneath his boots remembered blood spilled and sweat earned. The wind remembered promises broken and prayers whispered into empty skies. And the ranch, once a place of echoes and grief, remembered the man he used to be, even as it slowly welcomed the man he was becoming. After Black Ridge, nothing returned to what it had been before. Elias no longer rode alone with his thoughts chasing him like wolves. Clara rode beside him now, her presence steady, her eyes alert, her silence never empty. The town noticed it first, the way Elias listened when Clara spoke, the way she stood at his side without fear or apology. People whispered, some with approval, others with suspicion. A woman like her unsettled the old order of things, but Elias did not care. For the first time in his life, he was no longer trying to survive the days. He was building something meant to last beyond them. Clara kept her word. She ran the house with quiet efficiency, but she did not shrink herself to fit it. She taught local children to read on Sundays. She helped widows, barter fair prices in town, and when men spoke over her, she did not raise her voice, she simply waited, then spoke with such clarity that silence followed. Elias watched all of this from a distance at first, unsure of where he fit in a life that no longer revolved solely around his pain. One night, months after Black Ridge, a storm rolled across the plains, violent and sudden. Thunder cracked like gunfire. Clara woke gasping from a dream she could not shake, her hands trembling despite her strength. Without thinking, Elias crossed the hall and knocked on her door. She opened it. No words were spoken. None were needed. They sat together by the fire until dawn, sharing memories neither had ever dared to voice. Elias spoke of his first wife, the way she laughed, the way he blamed himself for surviving when she did not. Clara spoke of her brother, not just his death, but the boy he had been, and the life stolen from him. That night, Elias finally understood something that changed him forever. Love was not possession. It was presence. From then on, he stopped holding back. He let himself be seen, not as a hardened rancher, but as a man still learning how to live again. Trouble came in the spring. Men connected to the Black Ridge land theft scheme arrived, armed with papers and threats, demanding Elias sell his ranch. Clara recognized the names immediately. These were the men who had benefited from her brother's death. Fear tried to take root, but it did not last. Elias stood firm. "This land stays," he said simply. The standoff ended not with bullets, but with witnesses, records Clara had kept, and townsfolk who finally found their courage. The truth surfaced. The men retreated. Justice, slow and imperfect, finally caught up. That victory did more than save the ranch. It healed something broken inside Elias. Years passed. Children came, first one, then another. Laughter filled the cabin where silence once ruled. Elias became known not as the lonely man on the edge of town, but as someone others turned to for fairness, for help, for quiet wisdom. Sometimes late in the evening, Elias would sit on the porch with Clara, watching the sun sink into the land that had once felt like a prison. "I didn't buy a wife," he said once, his voice steady. Clara smiled softly. "No," she replied. "You chose to change, and that made all the difference." The wind still crossed the plains. The land still remembered, but now it remembered a man who learned that love was not a transaction but a transformation.